Hi, this is Elizabeth with Felted Sky, here with the instructions for our Easter egg party needle felting kit. Let's go ahead and open up the box. We'll talk about what's inside. First, I have to get the sticker. And then here it is. So first we have the instruction booklet. So in here, I just want to point out a couple of things. The first few pages are general information, and this will be helpful to you, hopefully, if you are new to needle felting. Then we get into the kit, and the first page is about sculpting the eggs, and then after that, each egg has its own page. So the little numbers right by the steps here, that's the time stamp for the video. So you can fast forward or rewind and go just to the part you want to see if you don't want to see everything, or if you want to cut ahead or go back to something. So that is the rest of the booklet, and we have some kits on the back that you might want to check out later. All right, so here are the things in the kit. That's the needle tube, but we're going to come back to that. So these eggs are already formed and they are partially felted. So they're still going to be a little bit squishy. You can squish on them. So that means they're not all the way done. We're still going to have to do some shaping. And then this is the wool. So we have two types of wool in this kit. This is what we call our felter's fleece. So you want to just take off the label. It does have the color name and the type of wool there. So you might want to just note that or save your labels in case you ever want to get these colors again. But then just open up the roll and find the end and unroll it. And also unfold it. Fold it over on itself a few times. And then just something to note about this is a batting and the fibers are going in this direction. So you can kind of see it already wants to split there. And that's the way that you'll be tearing it, starting at the top or an end. So if you tear the other direction against the way the fibers are aligned, it's going to be much harder to work with. So you want to always be tearing in the direction of the fibers. All right, this is the other type of wool in the kit. This is our felter's palette. So again, you'll just find the end and unroll, and then this one will have two other ends to unfold. So you want to just get these ready before you get started on your eggs. Sometimes you'll have an extra piece like that. It doesn't really matter. But that is the other type of wool. Also a batting, and the fibers are going lengthwise in that direction. So just keep that in mind once you start needing to tear into it. And then, of course, we have the colored eggs, the same as the white ones. And let's just talk a little bit about the needles. So on our needle tube, we have a color code on the back. So these are all the types of needles that we carry. And we just have one tube, so this lets you know whatever color your needles are that are inside. There's the little guide on the back in case you forget or need to reorder. So in here we have brown, which is our 38 twisted. The end of the needle actually does kind of spiral. You might notice that. Let's just talk a little bit about how to hold the needle before we get started. Alright, so I see a lot of people when they're new to needle felting, they tend to hold it with 2 or 3 fingers at the very top, and I do not recommend doing that. What I do recommend is putting the needle kind of in the crook of your pointer finger, like that, and then hold down on the shaft of the needle with your thumb and middle finger, something like that. Some people also like to put a ring finger on there as well. So the idea is to find a comfortable needle grip, but also to support the needle down on the shaft of the needle there. And I think that just helps to break less needles and be a little more effective with your needle. Alright, so that's a little bit about that. Hopefully hopefully that makes sense and you can develop that kind of muscle memory. And now we're going to jump right in and talk about sculpting and finishing the felting of the eggs. So they are still kind of squishy, and most of them are a little bit too long versus too round in the middle. So we're going to just kind of take a look. They're not always perfectly round either. It can be a little bit indented or lumpy. Alright, so I'm just going to pick out some eggs for us to work with for the video. And then we'll get started. So let's see what will be good here. Alright, so let's start with this egg, and I'm going to start on the bottom end. The bottom can be kind of flattened, and we want to kind of be pushing it towards the center and helping it to become a little better of an egg shape. So you can see we push it, we kind of want to be doing that to it. We want it to kind of squish up as we're felting it and not be quite so long. Alright, so the direction that we stab with the needle is the direction that the wool is going to move in and felt. So we're just going to start stabbing at the bottom end, and so we want to make it more round. So you always want to keep that in mind, and the direction your needle is stabbing is the direction the wool is going to move and felt down. And please be careful of your other fingers on the hand you're holding your egg with. Try and keep them as far away from the needle as possible, and be mindful of not stabbing yourself. Alright, and then we're just going to do this gradually. So you see I'm stabbing a little bit, and then I turn and stab a little bit more on the next section, and then turn the egg again. And my needle is going pretty far into the egg as well at this point. And then keep those other fingers well away and continue stabbing. So in needle felting, the needle has little notches, or sometimes they're called barbs, on the end of the needle, and those are just helping the wool fibers to tangle together. It's kind of like microscopic Velcro. So just the stabbing action of the needle is going to be felting the wool. So it's going to condense down and get more firm, and that is the felting process. You don't want to do any one spot too much. You want to do this gradually, because once the wool is very well felted, then you can't really fix shaping problems. So shape gradually, and it usually goes better. That's why I'm always kind of constantly turning. You can see our bottom of the egg is getting a little more round because of where I'm poking. Wherever it's kind of sticking out and I want it to be more round, that's where I'm going to poke more. And we can look at the bottom more directly here, and then work on it from a different angle. So wherever it's indented, you want to poke less, and then where it is kind of puffed out more, you want to poke more there, just so the whole thing starts to get nice and rounded and more smoothed out. Alright, so once we've done the bottom, you can see the shape is already improving. So it's not quite as long. Looks like a better egg shape already. So we're going to go to the other side and do the top of the egg. So very similar concept here. Think of an egg shape, and then move the wool in whatever direction is going to help your egg look the best. Look the most like an egg. Sometimes I even get out a real egg just to kind of look at it while I'm sculpting, if that helps. So if you find that you're poking yourself, you might want to get some finger guards, or you could even hold your egg like with a skewer or a different felting needle and keep your hand farther away. I've seen some people use various little tools that weren't really meant for felting, but there are things you can rig up to kind of hold your egg if you find that it's a little bit too dangerous to hold it closely yourself. So this part can go on for a while, as you're seeing, just a gradual process. I find it to be fairly meditative or stress relieving, kind of stabbing away and watching that wool felt up and smooth out. So as I mentioned before, you can watch the whole process, or if you feel like you've got it down, you can always jump ahead. I'm just going to let the video roll here for anyone that has never done needle felting and wants to watch kind of the whole shaping process. So I'm gradually working on the egg. Alright, so there is how far we've come. It's definitely looking better than when we started. Now I can kind of work more on the center of the egg, the middle part. I'm still angling in towards the center since it was kind of a long egg and not really having enough wool around the middle. I'm always kind of thinking of pushing that wool towards the center. And now I'm stabbing a little bit more shallow. So with my pokes, I'm not going in quite as far on this middle part. I needed to go in with the needle a little bit farther at the beginning of our shaping. But now that the kind of general shape is improved, I'm doing a little more shallow poking. So the farther you get with the shaping, kind of the less effort you need to put into the stabbing, and the needle doesn't have to go in as far. In fact, that will kind of help smooth the surface more. Little pokes that are not quite as vigorous, not quite going in as far. So as you practice your needle felting on all of these eggs, or maybe you're having more of a group or family party and you're only going to do one or two yourself, but the more needle felting you do, you will kind of develop a muscle memory and the technique of it, and it just becomes easier, kind of like learning to knit or crochet. It takes a little while to kind of get the rhythm of it, figure out how it works, but once you do, it's pretty easy to learn, I feel like. So just because mine looks fairly effortless doesn't mean that you won't get there too. Keep in mind I've been needle felting for maybe, I think 9 years now. the time of this video. So here I'm back to the top. I like to kind of go in a pattern. So I did the bottom, then the top, then the middle. And I'll do the bottom again, then the top, and then the middle. It's looking pretty good. Let's compare to one of the ones that we didn't felt anymore on. So you see it's definitely gotten smaller and firmer. Now let's go ahead and look at a colored egg, this blue one. This was a little firmer to begin with and already shrunk down more. So to change its shape, if you have an egg like this, it's already fairly firm. You have to really stab a little harder and go well into the egg with the needle. A little more oomph to your felting if you have an egg that needs a little shaping help, but it's already a little bit more felted to begin with. So there, I did a little on the bottom. Now I'm going to come up to the top. And this egg was a little better shaped to begin with, so it will not take quite as long. Even if you have some parts of your egg that are already fairly well felted, you can still work on their shaping. You just have to stab a little harder, very deliberately. Get that needle right in there. Here is a comparison. So the blue one is already looking more similar to the one we had to work on for quite a while. Alright, here's one more example real quick. Take a look at this green egg. You can see it's got more indents. It really doesn't have as much wool in the middle. So it's going to really need to be kind of pushed again towards that center. Speed up the video here just so you have one more example of me working on the shaping. I'll just do it a little quicker. I feel like with it sped up on the video here, you can kind of see the pattern. And I'm almost doing this unconsciously when I'm working on the egg. It's just stab and turn, stab and turn. kind of get into it with them. Alright, so there's our green egg after some work. Still a little bit bigger, but all in all fairly similar. And this could still have some more shaping work done to it. But it's looking pretty good. Alright, so you want to do that to all of your eggs before you decorate them. The decorating process will go better and the shape will stay much nicer. So this is our first egg that we are going to work on, the rainbow. And this is a nice one to start with. In general, we're starting with the easier ones and then the harder ones that are a little bit farther to the back of the booklet. So here is water lily, and we're going to tear off a strip. So tear off a piece, and then I like to work it in my palm, kind of like making a snake if you ever did that with clay. This helps if you have kind of moist hands, or you can have a wet rag or a sponge handy to kind of wet your palms and fingertips if you need to. We're going to lay the strip on the egg, just like that, kind of make sure it's in the spot that you want, and then just start poking it. I like to do the edges first and kind of have my angle of the needle like that. So the needle is angled kind of in a way that I'm catching the edge and pushing it, kind of that back edge, I'm pushing that into the center of the stripe, if that makes sense. You can also take the needle and very gently move the wool into place before you poke it down. Just need to be careful that you don't put torque on the end of the needle. It's the sideways pressure that would cause needles to break. And if you put something in place and you don't like where you've got it, you can at this point still pull it right up and reposition it. Or even start with a different piece of wool. There's extra wool in the kit. And then I'm going to hold and kind of pull my stripe out so that it's not too thick here. A lot of times it's a little thicker than you need, so you have to pull it thinner. And then pull off the extra. And then you'll just overlap the end, and that will blend right in. You won't even see where that end was. I'm still kind of getting these edges into place, and you can see you can take that tip of the needle, move the wool. Just do that carefully. So move and then poke. You don't want to try and move and poke at the same time. That's when you can snap the tip of the needle. And once the tip is snapped off, you just have to get another needle. Alright, so I'm tinkering a little, but it's in a pretty good place, and now I'm going to poke more on the center of my stripe, now that I've gotten the edges where I want them. And I'm just going around and slowly poking it all down into place. And you can go back and re-watch if you need to, or we will be doing the next stripe. These are all put on pretty much the same way, one right after another. Alright, so now take a look at it once you've got it all poked down, and then if there are parts that are thinner or where you see white coming through, just pull off another little piece of wool as an example. So these can either be bigger if you need them to be bigger, or they can be quite small, and you can just lay the extra piece of wool over top and poke it down. So any areas that got a little too thin or that are uneven, or where you see any of that white from the egg coming through, you want to have the wool thick enough that you're just seeing the pink color. So add any extra pieces that you need to, and get them all poked down. So once the wool is poked enough, it should not be fuzzy really. It will all kind of smooth out and be well attached to the egg. So if it's still kind of fuzzed up, poke it more. Alright, there's that stripe. Now we're going to go to the color coral, and this is the other type of wool. Just to show you an example of tearing into this one. Going from the top again, and I'm just going to tear a strip off. And I'll try for one that will go all the way around the egg, but if you don't make it all the way around the egg, you can always just add another strip and overlap where the ends are. I'm going to roll it again on my palm. Just find that the wool holds together better and ends up looking better if I do that. Alright, so hold it in place where you want it to be, and then start poking, and go just one little inch or two at a time, and then I'm going to pull just a little bit thinner, so my piece is still a little bit thick. Just trying to get a nice even stripe going all the way around the egg. Just poke one little inch at a time, and then go on to the next section. So once you're back around to where you started, tear off the extra. So I like to hold and tear. So I was holding with my thumb there to make sure I didn't tear off too much, and then just pull off the end and it will tear right off. On my first pass around, I'm just kind of getting it tacked down in place, and then I can always go back and poke it more. And here this one could use a little bit of extra wool. It's just a little bit. And sometimes I roll that even, and we put our extra piece into place. And just poke it right down, and you'll never even see that you had to add a little piece. Just blends right in. There's another piece going on. Add a little more thickness there. Alright, now we have in two colors, and you just continue doing the same thing until you've got in the full rainbow. So next will be yellow, then green, then blue, then purple. Alright, so here I put in the rest of my stripes, and after you have on the design, you want to just go back over the egg to do any final shaping. So here it kind of got indented where the stripes were, and then it's a little puffed out beyond the stripes. I'm just going to poke more right there. I want it to be a nice smooth transition from the white part to the stripes without kind of an indent there where the stripes start. I just need to poke a little more on the white end of the egg. You can see I'm still poking always toward the center, poking towards that purple stripe. Kind of push a little more wool up there to that line. And we can do the same thing for the other side if it needs it. And if you see any spots on your design that are looking fuzzy or like they didn't get all the way poked down, you can always go back over those as well. For each egg, we'll need just a little bit of finishing work at the very end. And there it is, looking good. Right, now we're ready for egg number 2. This is going to be the purple egg with coral stripes going lengthwise and white dots out of the color snow. And of course you can use my designs or you can change them up a little if you want. We're going to be putting on the lines so that we kind of make that star at the top there. Alright, so we have our egg. I've already prepared it by doing some extra shaping. And we're going to take coral, and the fibers are going lengthwise, and we're going to tear right into it, just like before with the first egg, and make a nice little stripe. I'm going to go ahead and roll it a little bit. These can be a little bit thinner than the rainbow on egg 1. So I'm going to kind of pull the wool and thin it out a little bit more before I put it on. And we're going to start over the top of the egg, trying to keep this stripe in the middle. And I'm going to tack down the edges first, for the most part. And thin it out by kind of just stretching it, letting it stretch out. If you accidentally tear it off, you can always just overlap and continue on. And again, if you're going to move the wool in place with your needle, just remember move and then poke. But you don't want to be poking and moving the wool at the same time. Alright, so just right in the middle there. And then back around to where I started, so I needed to pull off wool there, a little extra to pull off. And then we'll overlap the end. Alright, there's our first line. A little thin stripe going around. Now we're going to do one on this side of the egg. So this, you want to start out with kind of a cross or an X, however you see that, at the top of the egg, so perpendicular lines. So we're going to intersect the first one. So this line will divide the egg into 4 segments, and then we're going to put in 2 more after this one. I'm going to speed up again. Move things along a little bit faster. Alright, so now on to the third stripe. That's going to go all the way around the egg. This one goes more on the diagonal. In between two of our other lines, trying to keep the segments even. If you need to do this in multiple pieces, again, you'll just overlap the ends and keep going. If you need to fill in, like we talked about on egg 1, you'll just tear off extra pieces and use them to fill in. Alright, so this is our fourth line going all the way around, and we're going to end up with 8 hopefully even segments of the egg. Alright. At this point you can fix shaping a little bit if you want. I'm still doing a little bit of extra shaping here before we put on our dots. Alright, so now we'll grab the finished egg and show you we're going to put 3 dots in each little egg segment. So we're going to use snow, our color that is white. Pull off just a little bit and roll it in your palm to make the ball. Just kind of work with it till it's a nice, fairly round ball. If it looks too big when you lay it on there, just pull some off. I tend to make mine too big rather than too small. If you make it too small, you can always add more wool. And if it's too big, there's not much you can do with it except take it off and make it smaller. Alright, so with our little dots here, I'm going to work on the edges first again. So trying to make it nice and round, move the wool where I want it to go, and then poke it down. So edges and then the center. And I'm not poking terribly far into the egg at this point, not as much as when we were doing the shaping in the beginning. These are more shallow little stabs. Alright, so there's one little round dot, and we need to do 2 more in this segment. I'll tear some off again. Okay, my dot's too big. I'm just kind of slowly shaping until it's nice and round. You can take as much time as you need, and if you put on any that you don't like, just pull them off again before you felted them too much onto the egg. And if you need to pull one off, it comes off pretty easily still. So the more you've felted on it, the harder it is to get it back off. You've already stabbed it a lot, but usually you can still pull off the little things that you've put on. If you need to fix anything, it's pretty easy to do a fix, especially on little dots like that. Alright, so again, you could work on a little extra shaping if you need to as you go along, or you can just do that at the end. But I'm always seeing something I want to poke a little bit more. I had some indents where the white dots were. And now I'm just poking more on the purple. Trying to even everything up, smooth it out. Alright, so now you'll just add your dots to the rest of the egg. And I'm going to do mine off camera. So here it is, all finished. Got my dots in all the way around. Top and bottom. That's how they look. And then again, if you haven't done all of your extra shaping and smoothing as you went along, you can do a little bit more at the end, where we call it finished. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I'm always wanting to poke it more, make it nice and round, but this is looking pretty good, so we can move on to the next egg. Alright, this is a zigzag egg. It also has little dots on it, but the first thing we want to do is focus on a zigzag stripe at the top. So I'm going to start it with blue. You can see we have 5 points. That makes a star at the top. So 1, and start there, and then we'll have the same thing at the bottom. So there will be 5 points at the bottom. So a way that I've found to kind of help me get the placement right and keep it even is to do these little tiny dots. So just pull off a little tiny piece of wool, and we're just going to tack it on. So this is going to be where the top points are of our zigzag line. So you could just do it freeform, just kind of wing it without these markers in here. But this helps me when I'm getting ready so that when I put the line in, it's going to be kind of evenly spaced, and I get in all the points I want to get in. Alright, so here I only have 4, and I'm going for 5, so something's not quite right. I think I need to move them down just a little bit and give myself a bit more room. And also need to move some of them a little bit. So this just kind of prevents getting in a little bit of a pinch later with the placement of everything. Alright, now I have in 5 dots. They might not be quite evenly spaced, but they're close. Alright, so that's going to help me put in my line. Just kind of thinking this through. We might want to do dots for the other zigzag line. So that's our top one, and then the bottom line is going to mirror that. So the dots down here on the other end, so the points will be in between those two dots up top. And if you want to move them still, you can move them still. I'm still kind of thinking maybe I had them too high. So I don't always put them in quite right either. Just keep moving them around till I like where they are. All right. We can put in our 5 dots down at the bottom for our second zigzag line. These are just kind of placeholders. They don't have to be poked in a whole lot. The line is going to be going right over top of them. You won't even really notice that they were there. Alright, so that's what I'm going to start with. It's going to help me a little bit. And I'm going to take this little piece of blue and stretch it out, roll it a little bit, and get a line going. And no, that's going to be too long, but I'm just going to start it here. And I think I've confused myself even on the video here, so we're not going all the way down. We just need to do a V right now. So that's how we're going to get our V. There we go. That's what we needed. Just think of it like you're doing a little V that's going halfway in between the row on the top and the row of dots on the bottom. Or you can think of it like little mountains, peaks and valleys. I like to think of it as V's. Alright, so I went up to that other dot, now I'm going back down again. This is like the second V that I put in. And we ran out of wool there, so now I'm just going to go get another piece. If you want to put in the extra markers for the V's, you could do that. So they would just go here in between our top dots. So then you'll be going get the next line of wool ready. Alright, finish this V. Back down now. You want that other dot in there, then you can go down to that one and not be confused, hopefully. I'm just pushing and pulling the wool, getting it in place, holding it in place while I poke it down. If you wanted to do this with smaller strips of wool, you don't have to try and keep one the whole time. You could do smaller pieces. Just overlap them. That might be kind of a fun challenge to see if you can do this one long strip. So you just kind of figure out what works for you when you're needle felting. Everybody does it just a little bit different. Alright, and we've sped up now just to go ahead and get this moving along. Alright, our first zigzag line is in. So now I'm going to work just a little bit on my shaping, but you could save this to the end. So I'm just going to push some wool back towards that zigzag line. Make sure my top point isn't looking too pointy on the egg. Usually I find little bits of dirt or some kind of bits of hay or something in there, so you can pick those out if you ever see them, if you want to do that. Alright. So now let's put in the next line. Still looking at my other markers that I've put in. For some reason doing this on the video is not as easy. Alright, so here is where that bottom point is going to be, and then it's going to go up and come back down. So we're just going to be mirroring that line, and if we want to put in our extra markers, and go from that one to that one, and that one to that one. I'm just going to get myself all set up before I actually put in the line. But again, you could just wing it if you want, and that often works as well. Alright, moving them again. Just going to give myself a little more space to work with. Feel free to fast forward if you want. Alright, now I've got all my dots on that are going to help me put my line where I want it to be. I'm just going to poke right over top of that dot. And we're mirroring the top line. Okay, so now finally have both zigzag lines in. Took me a little while with my markers. Alright, so now we're going to put in any fillers that we need. You need to fill in any parts of the line, just add your little extra bits. And I'm going to do a little more shaping from the other end. Pushing, always pushing towards the middle. And push up next to the zigzag line. I'm going to round out the bottom a little bit more. Okay. So now, let's look at what else we have to do here. We have some dots and white lines. So these dots I will roll a little bit. If they're too big, we'll tear a little bit off. It's a pretty good size there. So then we'll just poke these down. There, I'm kind of popping it back out. Alright, so one there, one here. I'm just going to put these in at these regular intervals all the way around. Put one more in here. Okay, and then for our white lines, we're using snow again, and I'm just going to tear off more thin strips and roll. So I got white line on the bottom, white line on the top, right next to our blue lines. These are going to go in just the same, but now we can just put them right up next to the blue lines, and we know right where they're going. And if you want to do it with smaller pieces, that's totally fine. Sometimes it's hard to make one piece stay together all the way around. Alright, so you'll just continue that and you see how that's going to go. And I've finished mine off camera. But again, at the very end, you might want to do a little more finishing, smoothing, pushing towards that white line now, rounding the bottom, rounding the top. All right. So here we are with egg 4, and it's on the pink egg, and we're using agave, lemon tart, and snow. We have a pink egg ready. And the first stripe I like to do, you could do the snow stripe there, but I actually like to start with a little bit thicker stripe, so I'm going to do a green stripe as my first one. So same technique we've been doing. I'm going to pull off a strip. I'm going to roll it on my palm. And then stretch it around the egg. Thin it out just a little bit. Alright, once you have it all lined up where you want it, then I'm going to poke the edges again, like we've been doing. I'm going to hold and tear off the extra. And get a nice overlap on the end, kind of smooth things out there. And poke till it's all nice and attached, smoothed out, no longer fuzzy. Alright, now I'm going to put in my thinner stripe of snow. Get a thinner line. This white often has some extra little bits of dirt and stuff in it, so you can pick that out if you see it. And I want this one to be thinner, so I'm going to just keep working with it, keep pulling it out until it's a thinner line. And then I'll poke it down. Alright, and if you need to add any extra pieces, just to add more, like all of our other lines we've done. Okay. Now we're going to do a thicker stripe of lemon tart, yellow. So I'm tearing it off similarly, but I'm just not going to stretch it out as much. I'll leave this one thicker. Or wider, however you want to view that. We'll speed up a little bit again just to get this in here. And again, if you ever want to jump ahead, if you're feeling confident with your technique now, putting in all of these lines and stripes, you can always just jump ahead to the next segment you want to see. All right. So now we're going to put in another line of white and then green and then yellow. So it's hard to see, but the one at the bottom is a yellow line. All right, so I'll do that off camera. And now I'm going to put in the zigzag. So this is very similar to the last one we put in. I'm going to use some little markers just to help me a bit, little tiny bits. So I'm going to do 5 of these again for our zigzag line. Try and get them evenly spaced. Alright, so now I have in 5 little dots. That's going to be where the points of my zigzag are. And if you need to move them, you just pull out and poke it back in. And then if you want to put markers for your bottom points, there will be 5 here. It's going to go like that to there. So you can put in the rest of those little dots on the bottom points, but I'll just go ahead and get started. So this line I want to be pretty thin, so I'm just going to keep working with it and pull it till it's thinned out. Then I'm going to start right on one of my dots, go down to the next dot, get that one segment poked down, and then I'll hold the wool and stretch it up, and poke down that next segment. Here's our first V, then I'm going to go back down again. Spend a little extra time at the points, making sure they're staying in place. And stretch up to my next dot. You can see how that's going, so you'll just do that all the way around. Alright, so if we want to do a little bit of extra shaping at the end, same story, I'm going to be poking towards that first stripe, pushing towards that first stripe, and rounding the bottom a little bit more here at the end. And then do the top as well. And sometimes you need to go back over parts of the design if they look like they need a little more poking also. Alright, so there it is, another finished egg.